Managing chronic conditions using MedTech devices.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is the final topic before you can all head out, enjoy the sun and drinks. My name is Abdul, co-founder of Peer and a podcast called Scrubbed In Show. Today's topic is managing long-term conditions using MedTech, and I've got an esteemed panel with me. If you want to come up onto the stage, so I'll allow the guests to introduce themselves. If you want to start first, Matt.
Hello there. So my name is Matt. I'm a GP registrar based in London, part of Imperial College Healthcare NHS Trust. And I've got two roles essentially. Will beyond my clinical, which is to integrate medical technology as part of our clinical pathways. And then I'm also part of a local medical council, in which I represent GPs for service procurement.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm really glad to be here, really glad to see your curious faces. I come from Oxford, England. I run a medical devices company called Fine Treatment. We have a novel technology that is Class 1 medical devices. And I'll tell you how we can treat, in a novel way, we can treat different chronic diseases non-surgically, non-invasively, shifting the delivery of care from hospitals to primary care. Apart from running the company, I also support economic development of my region. I'm a board director at Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and I'm also a leadership fellow at St. George's House at Windsor Castle.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sabina Kaposki. I'm a gynec surgeon, and I am the Global Strategy Advisor for UN Disaster Assessment and Coordination, but apart from that, what's more relevant for here is I'm part of several health investment committees. I lead the one at Blackrock, Softbank, ADB, IFC, of course, as well as a couple of other banks, which is NDB and DBS. And I have a fair bit of network in the hedge financing in health technology, which is largely around my network from Wharton. So that's essentially the kind of work that we do.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Vinoy. I'm the lead of communication and stakeholder engagement at Byteflies, a remote patient monitoring solution. We're a startup based in Belgium. Through our devices, we have some experience creating remote monitoring solutions for patients within chronic care conditions in the neurology and the cardiology space.
So we know there's an increasing global burden of disease. There's a research paper saying 1 in 3 adults suffer from chronic long-term conditions. The first question I want to ask you all is, how are we currently managing long-term conditions? What have you seen? If you're a practicing clinician, what are coming through your doors?
Yeah, so chronic conditions are taking more and more of our time as clinician. I can't remember what the exact figures are, but I think roughly 80% of our time and the cost of healthcare is going towards chronic condition. The way things are going at the moment, yes, we are getting much better at managing them, but with that comes extra cost and also extra time in terms of clinician. And unless we do something different, things are not going to end well, basically.
So just giving some statistical data, 52% of all people in the United States say that they have a chronic disease, and about 30% of all people in the US have more than one chronic disease. So that's a huge number of people with chronic diseases. And the problem, as my co-panelist has highlighted, is that the costs of treatment of chronic diseases are going up, and these costs become unsustainable. Our healthcare systems cannot cope, especially since we're facing the aging population scenario. So I don't want to say problem, because actually it can be a very fulfilling time for the majority of the population. So what we need to do is focus on technologies that can not just prolong health span, but make it really, really attractive for people and possible for people to enjoy high quality of life later in their lifetime.
So the answer to your question is we are not.
Yeah.
73% of the global south is not managing non-communicable or preventable long-term diseases. Plus, what exactly we are managing is just adverse instances. For example, for diabetes, we are managing diabetic retinopathy or CKD. We are not managing diabetes at all, or for the majority of the population. But we could. If we are able to design, say, relevant insurance products which are backed by medical devices, which can at scale both diagnose as well as manage, then the cost of care can go down significantly enough that we can spread it out across a larger period. So I think we are not, but we definitely can.
Yeah, I think I'm always driven by this story of a friend of mine who has Parkinson's disease, and she often starts her talk with this graphic about how she meets her doctor for 2 half-an-hour sessions a day, 2 half-an-hour sessions in a year, and the rest of the 365 days she has to live with this condition and with an inability to express or describe what she's going through in the rest of the time. And so along with these statistics, I think with this very specific use case, it's the idea that in 2023, we should be able to have the technologies in place, I think, to be able to give doctors extend the reach of their care beyond the time when a patient is in front of them and have that continuum of care. I think that's what technologies and MedTech devices do.
Yeah, I agree with Sabine. We are, and we have to be honest, we are struggling with the management of long-term conditions. And the second question which naturally follows is, how can we use health tech, MedTech, to kind of alleviate the burden of managing patients with long-term conditions? I know, Matt, you're a clinician. Tell us about times you've potentially used tech to kind of help you.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, in the past 18 months or so, what's been really incredible for me in practice has been continuous glucose monitors. Because it gives data to patient, and actually we often forget that patients are part of this, but then they need to be on board. And it also gives data to us, but in a way that we can understand it and we can act upon. I'll give you an example, but I had a patient that was 52 recently, new diagnosis of diabetes type 2. We started him on oral medication, but unfortunately things didn't improve. We escalated things. He ended up on 4 oral medication, and still we weren't able to control his diabetes. At that point, the endocrine team got involved, and we started him on insulin. But at the same time, they started them on the continuous blood glucose monitor, and essentially it's this little machine that you get on your arm. And within 3 weeks, he massively reduced his insulin requirement. And a few months later, he was off insulin altogether and back on only 2 oral medication. Oh, wow. So, when patients are able to see what they're doing and understand what's going on, then technology can make a massive difference.
What has been your experience, Ariana, with using tech to manage long-term conditions in patients?
Well, actually, we designed a technology, a non-invasive technology that, as I've said, shifts the delivery of care from hospitals to primary care, to home, for a number of chronic diseases, such as kidney stone disease. We have a range of wearable medical devices, class 1 medical devices, that can not only alleviate the symptoms, but actually treat these diseases. We've currently completed 5 clinical trials for different indications, including kidney stone disease, benign prostatic hyperplasia. So our technology is world's first to reduce the volume of abnormally enlarged prostate gland. We also target chronic prostatitis when the gland is inflamed rather than abnormally enlarged. We also target chronic back pain, either due to intervertebral discs problems, so slipped discs, herniated discs, or non-specific causes. All of these health conditions are united by abnormal capillary blood circulation. And that's exactly what we target in a smart and novel, patented way. And what is really important is to diagnose the condition properly, and then give the tools to the doctors, enable the doctors to choose appropriate tools for their patients. And this is one of the tools that we are now offering to doctors.
No. And Ariana?
That's okay. So I think we need to look at it from a systems perspective. What both of you said makes sense. Devices are going to be key when we are looking at this, because what devices do, especially non-invasive devices, is brings down the variable costs for care, both in testing as well as in implementation. But when I say we look at it from more of a systems understanding, what I mean is we need, so I am a big believer of insurance if done right. VBIS is value-based insurance systems, which has been a concept which has been around now since 1980s. Though apart from within universal health coverage, we have never been able to implement that. So the idea is to have managed care covered through implementation risks across a fairly large population by distributing risk of incidences across the board. And when we are able to do that and use devices as such, both for testing regularly as well as for implementation of care and bring down the cost, at that time we make it viable for a much larger population. And for that we need to look at other financial modalities, right? Reinsurances, and hedge the risk across to pass on the cost and bring it down. So I think those are the kind of models that I find fascinating and I believe can work for a large-scale management of care.
Vinoy, what do you think, the role of MedTech in managing conditions?
Yeah, I can speak from some of the experiences we've had at Byteflies. So, for example, we've been active in the epilepsy space. So, there, oftentimes the seizure burden is unclear from the small amount of testing that is done in the hospital. It's inadequate. It tends to put a lot of pressure on patients. They have to be in the hospital wires, kept awake. Little kids have to be kept awake in the hope that their sort of epilepsy is triggered. And we have use cases now where, or stories from patients who have been sent home, little children too, regularly measured, and were able to detect sort of more appropriate seizure burden in their regular life and adjust medication, which led to much better quality of life for them. So we see that in epilepsy. Similarly, in cardiology, detection of conditions that are not immediately available in a short monitoring period in the hospital. So see a lot of benefits in those.
And the final question I want to pose to the panelists is, what recommendations do you have? Do you think we need to revisit the way we measure impact and efficacy? Is randomized controlled trials still the way? Do we need to have more conversation between industry and healthcare and clinicians? And what are the other problems? Do you want to tech enable when we do have a workforce crisis? So I'd be interested to hear kind of recommendations of what you think we need to see that wider level of adoption to helping manage long-term conditions using tech.
Yeah, so I think for me, the two most important things probably are going to be education and patient involvement, clinician involvement early on when you're developing. So, at the moment, we get very little education within our medical training about technology and how technologists think. And I think that companies kind of need to involve clinician early as well as patient early to make products work for them. I know that already some companies are doing that, such as Byte Labs. And then the other thing would be interoperability. So At the moment, there's a lot of duplication of scans, of notes, which really do not need to be done. But because systems don't talk to each other, we end up losing a lot of resources and time, which could be better appropriated.
Definitely. I think it's important to have that clinician input because they are on the front line delivering the care. Ariana?
Clinical trials, especially randomized clinical trials, is still the gold standard of showing your data. And this is something that we've been taking seriously, even though we're a class 1 medical device. And the regulation is more fluid for us, let's put it this way, not as stringent as more invasive medical devices. Nevertheless, in order for us to be taken seriously by the medical community, we did show what our technology can do in terms of efficacy and safety, most importantly, safety, for patients in, as I said, 5 by now clinical trials. The challenge that we see are the innovation adoption pathways into healthcare systems, the lack of innovation adoption pathways for MedTech devices. It is very customary to come to your treating medical doctor and receive a pill, but it's very rare, especially in the UK, that's where we're based, to come to a GP and receive a prescription for a device to use at home. And this is something that I discussed with our senior clinicians and decision makers, and they acknowledge that the pathways are lagging behind the current technological developments. And so this is the bridge that we need to build. And I hope that forums like this are actually going to help and highlight this issue of many exciting technologies coming out of the industry that are not just adopted yet, and we don't have the pathways to easily absorb them. So really looking forward to these changes.
No, definitely.
Can I put your question aside for a second and give my 2 cents on the industry at large?
Of course.
That's okay with you? So I have slightly contrarian views. First, though I am extremely bullish on medical devices, I still believe that for most of the world, we are not ready for shifting the burden of care to the patient yet. We still require a lot more focus on repeated testing through, and which is why POC devices and POC positioning, point of care positioning, is going to be very, very important, because that helps us determine baseline data sets, risk assessments, and then add financial modalities to those risks, which can make solutions viable and fast across a large population. So that's one. Second is that, and of course, continuous monitoring is really, really important. In certain cases, we have focused a lot of our energies on that. We really need to scale back and talk about how to manage with minimalist interventions. Try to make sure that we give only indicated outcomes and make sure that we manage those outcomes at the cheapest possible cost, because at the base of it, adoption at scale is extremely important and would not happen without cost management. So both finance and looking at technology from the right direction is going to be extremely important. It is my 2 cents overall.
No.
Absolutely.
I do agree. I think I have enough time to say I agree with that point of view.
Yeah.
I think as a barrier to adoption, I think many of the things that have been spoken, education, just being able to sort of roll these things out and have them be a part of the medical usage as much like prescription drugs is a key part. And I think we see some barriers in terms of reimbursement policies, because Belgium, we have a national healthcare system there. We have very classical sort of fee-for-service system models there. So some of the new digital health devices that have more kind of flexible usage patterns seem to be an odd fit with the existing payment models, let's say. So innovation in sort of payment models, I think, is a key.
So what it seems like for better adoption of MedTech for managing such conditions, we need more clinician input, we need more conversation between industry partners and healthcare, we need adoption pathways. Clinicians need to know about medical devices they can prescribe similarly to the medications. And I agree with Sabine, we need to do things that are cost effective, that can be done at scale, and maybe taking a step back and seeing things we can manage. You know, one of the biggest reasons why people develop long-term conditions is stuff like smoking, diet, lifestyle. And I agree with Vinoy, it's kind of the payer models. Thank you once again for sharing your thoughts.
Just one more thing, because you mentioned that digital therapeutics is a very, very interesting thing, you know. Just the presence of mobile phone in our lives have drastically changed our behaviors, whether we want to accept it or not. I mean, I can't stay away from this thing for more than a couple of hours. Honestly, I mean, I would rather stay away from my child than my phone. Not a good statement to make, yeah, of course.
Is this recorded?
Not going back home. Yeah. No, but the point is that because that has been the case, we really, that is one thing when we talk about cost-effective interventions, we really need to look at digital therapeutics, the kind of work that you guys are doing. Along with that, look at behavioral modifications slowly and steadily, because we, up until now, we thought, even I thought it was not possible, you know, I was completely dismissing the whole idea. But now with the kind of data that we are getting from the US FDA trials for 13 parallel therapeutic areas and the amount of work that is coming out of it, it's fascinating. So one of the things that need to be focused on is also that in terms of intervention, both cost effective and otherwise.
No, I completely agree. Thank you so much for our panels, and thank you very much for our guests. I hope you can go and enjoy the Malta weather.